If you've often wondered how to come up with a cool guitar riff, I want to give you a couple things to think about and see if this might help you in coming up with a plan. So the first thing is you've got to decide what kind of chord you want. Do you want your chord and your chord progression to be more typical, or do you want it to be a little bit more atypical? So let me explain to you what I mean. If I was going to take just simple power chords and put together something that went just more of a regular rock or metal kind of song, and that's what you were looking for, the trick there is just deciding what distances you want between your chords. If I take a power chord and I do something like this, it's already going to have that kind of awkward, dark, metalish sound. With that half step. If I kept everything whole steps, it's going to have more of a typical kind of power metal sort of riff sound. So you can combine those together, obviously. You can think of anything. And just please understand, when we're talking about riffs, for me, I don't start with like theory and thinking about what chords are or are not proper. I just try and explore different things and see what I like the sound of. So if I do something like this, that sounds like that. If I do this, you see it sounds very different depending on whether I play the 8 or I play the 9, and that's something for me to decide. We're going to go into some other chords as we keep going, but let's just expand on this. So now the next thing is you start thinking about all of the rhythmic possibilities that you have in creating your riff. Now, if I'm tuned standard, which I am right now, you could drop tune or whatever it is you want to do. But I know that I've got this open E string that I can use for palm muting to help me create a riff. So if I've got... See, I could do more of a staccato thing where I've got more palm muting involved in between. You see, where if I was doing something like Heaven and Hell by Sabbath, for instance, there's nothing that changes about the rhythm until it gets to the end of the riff. So it depends on what you want it to sound like. If you like more of a staccato kind of thing, or maybe you want it a little bit faster moving, you see, you can do things like that. So learning that you can stay on a chord for a longer amount of time, or you can use those palm mutes in between to shorten things up. And you can go back and forth. Again, this is sort of how riffs are created, is you just start coming up with an idea. See, something like that. Now, the next thing is taking that chord, the power chord that we're playing, this traditional sort of power metal power chord thing that I'm playing, and we can start altering the chord itself to the point where it just becomes all kinds of very experimental things. So, for instance, if I took this chord, now I'm not moving to all of these different chords. I'm staying in one place, and I'm exploring different kinds of sounds that I can get from that particular chord by moving my finger. And I could combine that with something like that, anything I want. Now, I don't have to just work off of this either. I could start making different kinds of chords, maybe by going to the other side. Instead of being on the power chord here, I might come over here. And again, just look for different kinds of sounds. Now, if that all sounds a little bit too 80s metal, we could start changing the chord structure itself into something different. This is why learning songs by other artists are a really great idea, because you can look and go, oh, that's what so-and-so does, right? So I'm, taking a Dream Theater-ish kind of add 9 chord here, which is a power chord, but I'm adding the 9 on the top. So I can do different kinds of things like that too. Or so now it's not all this chugging that I'm doing, although I could add that in between. But see now how it sounds a little bit different than that traditional 80s style by playing this, what we call an add 9, or a power chord with this extra note up on top there. And we could explore all kinds of different chord shapes in this sort of now you're going to notice right away that sounds a little bit happier, a little less, minor power metal-ish. So I can do lots of different things like that. I could explore chords that use open strings in between as well. Okay, so when it comes to a riff, the big thing is you want something that's memorable. Now, I haven't even started adding in single notes because we could add something like that too. So, anytime you think of like, that could be a riff, you know what song I'm talking about. You could take any kind of thing that you like that. And use things like that, or, it could be anything. I think for me, it always starts with chords. Like, do I want it to be more of a traditional kind of power chord sound, or do I want something a little bit more, for lack of a better word, modern, and where the chord isn't just a power chord? And then the second thing is do I want it to be more of a chugging kind of thing, or do I want it to be maybe more rhythmic, like I was doing with the... right? Something like that, more of maybe leprous, if you know who that is. And there's a million ways to do that. Or do I want it to be more of a single note picking thing, and I could use a combination of these. But just remember, the basic idea of the riff is whatever it is you come up with, it should be kind of memorable in sound. If there's any other topics that you'd love me to discuss, make a video on, please do me a favor and leave your ideas in the comments, and I would love to read them and get to them, all right?